Mom, please just explain. Why did you forge my signature and open credit accounts in my name? I asked, keeping my voice level, trying to hold back the tremor. There was a silence on the line, just a beat too long. She huffed that particular sound that meant she was already bracing herself for me to burst into tears. Oh, don't start, Emma. You always blow things out of proportion. I'm not exaggerating. I saw the credit history. I was just helping the family, and you actually... I gripped the phone until my knuckles were white. You used my social security number. We're family, this is a grilling. Just answer the question. Why? I said, my voice barely a whisper. She took a dramatic breath, as if I were deliberately wearing her down. Your sister needed a proper 18th birthday, a celebration she deserved. At my expense. You're selfish, Emma. You always have everything. I laughed, a short, brittle sound. I've only ever earned what I've worked for. And these credits, I just found out about them. Don't you dare speak to your mother like that, she snapped. If you were a decent daughter, you'd understand. I ended the call. My hands shook. But beneath it all, a strange calm settled over me, as if something long and fractured had finally shattered completely. And that's when it hit me. This conversation hadn't begun today. It had started days, weeks, perhaps even months ago. My graduation was supposed to be the day I finally felt it. I'd done it. It was meant to be the culmination. A prestigious college, a master's degree, the final act. The stadium blazed with sunlight. Blue gowns, flashes of cameras, the shouts of names. Rows for family, directly in front of the stage. When the announcer declared, Emma Claire Wilson, Master of Business Analytics, I automatically lifted my head. And I looked where my parents should have been. The row was empty. The metal seats gleamed under the sun, cold and indifferent. Neither mother nor father nor sister. I forced a smile for the photographers, a smile I'd practiced for years. Beside me, a woman hugged her son, weeping, saying, We're so proud of you. I stood slightly apart, clutching my diploma, and felt something constrict within me, but not break. I'd long ago forbidden myself to shatter. After the ceremony, I wandered the grounds, feigning responses to texts. Really, I was stalling, delaying the inevitable departure. Emma, you did it! Her parents snapped a photo of us together. Then she glanced around, asking, Where are your parents? They're running behind, I replied too quickly. The lie was a familiar one, a tested and proven shield. As I reached the parking lot, the sky turned gold. Balloons, laughter, embraces. I sat in my old Toyota and simply sat for a few minutes. And yes, for a fleeting second, I pictured my mother walking towards me, waving, my father carrying flowers, my sister scrolling through her phone, not even glancing at me. The vision vanished as quickly as it had appeared. I shouldn't have been surprised. They weren't here either, not for my bachelor's. Then Mom said Sarah had exams. Dad didn't even call. There was always a reason, something perpetually more important. Starting at 16, I worked. First a coffee shop, then 2 jobs at once. I sent money home regularly. Thank you, sweetheart, Mom would write. Sarah wants dance lessons. Sarah needs a new phone. Sarah's having a birthday. When she first said, We're so proud of you, I believed it. Only later did I understand. Their pride always sounded like an invoice. The message from Mom arrived as dusk settled, just as I was beginning to acclimatize to the silence. I stood by the window, watching a neighbor walk his dog, and realized that the graduation had been just 3 days ago, as if an entire life had passed. The phone vibrated. Mom, need $1,800. Urgent. For Sarah's birthday. I didn't respond immediately. I sank onto the sofa, placing the phone face down. The apartment was quiet, but it wasn't a comforting quiet. It was taut, like the air awaiting my decision. I remembered rising at 5 a.m. to make it to the coffee shop shift. Standing behind the counter in a uniform smelling of milk and caramel, thinking I was doing it for my family, for the moment she would finally say, You're important. I opened the banking app. The account looked meager, almost empty, but these were my money, my hours, my sleepless nights. I typed in $10, added a brief, happy birthday. Before pressing send, my finger froze. This wasn't just a transfer of funds, it was a statement. When the money left, I felt a strange weakness in my knees, like after a long run. I approached the drawer by the front door, pulled it open. Inside lay a spare key, old, scratched with a plastic tag. Mom had insisted it be kept with her, said, just in case, in the unlikely event of something happening to me. I stared at the key for a few seconds. Then I tossed it into the trash. In that moment, I understood there was no going back. The locksmith arrived 40 minutes later, a slight man with graying temples in a work jacket smelling of metal and machine oil. Replacing it entirely? He asked, examining the door. Completely, I replied. He worked in silence. Metal clinked, tools clicked, the old latch resisted, as if unwilling to relinquish the past. I stood beside him, watching the old lock come off. Each click felt like more than just repairs. When the new lock clicked into place, the locksmith handed me the keys. Access now only for you, he said. I closed the door, turned the key. The click echoed louder than it should have. It was the sound of a boundary. The night had been restless, a tangle of anxious dreams. I dreamt someone was frantically twisting the knob on the front door, again and again, until the metal began to bend. I made coffee in the morning, but I couldn't bring myself to drink it. The mug sat cold on the table as I moved through the flat, listening intently to every creak and whisper. Then, just after 10, I heard it, a clear, deliberate sound, 3 sharp knocks. I froze. My heart hammered against my ribs, a frantic drumbeat in the quiet of the room. I crept to the peephole and peered out. 2 uniformed officers. Calm, almost unnervingly so, not aggressive, but present. I didn't open the door right away. Miss Wilson, one of them asked, his voice measured. We're with the police. Your mother called in concerned. A coldness spread through me, settling deep in my bones. She said you've been acting erratically, he continued, changing the locks, not answering the phone, and possibly putting yourself at risk. I took a step back, a small, involuntary movement. Please come in. They entered, taking in the room with a quiet scrutiny. It was simply a flat, a lived-in space belonging to an adult. Neat, tidy, unremarkable. Are you taking any medication today? The officer asked, her voice gentle. No, I replied, the word feeling strangely brittle. Have you had any thoughts of harming yourself? No, I said, the answer sharper this time. I've just been having thoughts of protecting myself. The man nodded, scribbling something in his notebook. Did you call a locksmith yourself? Yes, I said, almost automatically. I have a right to do that. Of course. He glanced at the framed diploma on the wall, a small, almost awkward gesture. Congratulations on graduating. The words hit me with a force I hadn't anticipated. A strange, unexpected ache. Thank you, I whispered, my voice barely audible. A few minutes later, they were heading for the door. We'll document that there's no immediate threat, the officer said. If these calls continue, you can refer back to this visit. As they turned to leave, he paused, looking back at me. Sometimes, when someone stops complying, people call it a problem. I sank to the floor, leaning against the door, the weight of his words settling over me like a shroud. Now there was no room for doubt. It wasn't worry. It was a desperate attempt to regain control. It's been a few more days now. Not dramatic, not really, just almost normal. I'd gone for 2 interviews, one for a data analysis firm downtown, the other at a small startup. I'd put on a blazer, straightened my shoulders, forced a smile, talked about my projects and my diploma. The usual stuff. People nodded. They asked questions. They looked at me like I was a qualified professional, not some asset to be exploited. It felt strangely pleasant, actually. A little bit of a relief, maybe. On the way home, I grabbed a coffee to go, and I found myself walking slower, not glancing at my phone every 5 seconds. Just existing. For a couple of days, there were no calls, no messages, no demands. I almost started to believe the storm had passed. That evening, almost automatically, I opened my banking apps, checking balances, paying bills, making sure everything was in order. And that's when I saw it. My brain just, flat out, refused to process it at first. 2 new notifications, new credit lines. I blinked, closed the app, opened it again. No, they weren't going anywhere. Credit accounts. Opened a few days ago. My name, my social security number. The address, it wasn't mine. It was my parents'. A coldness started creeping up from my stomach, tightening around my chest, making it hard to breathe. It wasn't panic, not really. More like a sudden, sharp clarity, too precise, too undeniable. I clicked on the details. There were transactions, advances, bookings, payments I'd never made. "No," I blurted out, the word barely audible. My hands were shaking, but I still pressed the button to call customer support. "Thank you for calling the bank," the woman said, her voice calm and practiced. "How can I help you?" "I'm seeing some credit accounts that I didn't open," I said. "I need to verify the information." She asked the standard questions, confirming my identity. It was a routine process, almost sterile. Then there was a pause, short but heavy like a held breath. "These accounts were opened at a branch," she finally said. "2 days ago." "At a branch," I repeated, the words feeling strangely foreign on my tongue. "Yes, with proper documentation." I gripped the edge of the desk, my knuckles turning white. "Who was the applicant?" Another pause, longer this time. "The primary applicant is Melissa R. Wilson. She listed you as your mother." Something shifted inside me then, a quiet click, like a puzzle piece finally falling into place. It wasn't a break, but a sudden, unsettling realignment. "So," I said slowly, deliberately, "she opened these accounts in my name." "Yes, ma'am. We can initiate a fraud investigation if you confirm that you did not authorize them." "I didn't," I said immediately, my voice firm. "Neither verbally nor in writing." "Then we recommend you file a formal report of identity theft. I'll send you the instructions now." I thanked her and hung up. The apartment was bathed in the muted glow of the evening light. The interviews, the plans, the conversations about the future, they all faded into the background, distant and irrelevant. All that remained was a single, insistent question. Did she really think this would slide by? I pulled out my phone, hit record, and dialed her number. She answered almost immediately. "Why haven't you been picking up your phone?" Mom snapped, her voice sharp, devoid of any greeting. I stared out the window at the slowly darkening sky and spoke with an unsettling calmness. "Mom, please just explain. Why you're secretly forging my signature and opening credit accounts in my name." Silence hung on the line. Then a brief, dismissive chuckle. "Oh, Emma, don't start. You always blow things out of proportion." "I just spoke with the bank," I said. "The accounts were opened 2 days ago, at a branch with your address." "And what?" Her voice hardened with irritation. "I was helping family." "You used my information," I countered. "That's a crime. Don't be ridiculous, we're relatives, you're obligated to help. Helping isn't about becoming you on paper." She sighed, as if speaking to a fussy child. "You've always been complicated. You have an education, prospects, and Sarah has a celebration. Do you want her to look worse than everyone else?" "You didn't even ask about my graduation," I said quietly. "But you found the time to become me for a credit account. Don't turn everything upside down," she raised her voice. "You're ungrateful. Everything you have, it's thanks to the family." I felt a wave of weariness rising within me, not anger. "No," I said. "Everything I have, I've earned myself. And what you did, it's already under investigation." The silence thickened, became viscous. What did you do?" she finally asked, her voice a strained whisper. "I reported it to the bank, and this conversation is being recorded." "You wouldn't dare," she breathed. "I already have," I replied. I pressed end. The recording remained saved. The phone lay on the table. And in that moment, I finally understood. This wasn't a conflict. It was the end of one role and the beginning of another. The silence after that conversation wasn't empty anymore. It had become heavy, saturated with anticipation. The next day, I received the first letter from the bank. Formal, instructions, a checklist of documents. I printed everything out and laid it on the table, as if it weren't my own life, but a detached dossier. Identification confirmation, fraudulent statement, account description. I wrote slowly, deliberately, fighting to keep emotions from bleeding into the words. My mother, without my consent. The phrase felt strangely unreal, almost sterile. Then came the calls. The bank's security team, credit bureaus, a federal form for identity theft. Each conversation began the same way, with sympathy, and ended the same way with questions that made me want to close my eyes. "Are you absolutely certain you didn't give verbal consent?" Have you lived at this address in recent years? Do you have any evidence that the signature was forged? I responded calmly. But with each no, I felt something irrevocably break within me. It was like clearing out the rubble after a fire. You don't weep anymore, you simply tally the losses. A few days later, an announcement arrived. The accounts were temporarily frozen. I felt a brief, cautious relief, like a deep breath after holding it for too long. But with it came another feeling, a chilling fear. Because now, everything was officially documented. Mom could no longer pretend this was a family matter. It was now a legal process. I barely slept. I replayed our childhood, conversations, requests, the years I'd sent money, trying to pinpoint the moment when it all became abnormal. And I couldn't find it, because for me it had always been normal. One evening, a call came from an unknown number. "Emma Wilson?" A male voice inquired, calm and businesslike. "Yes, my name is Daniel Harper. I'm a detective investigating the identity theft case against you." I straightened up, as if he could see me. "We need to meet," he continued. "There are nuances that are better discussed in person." "Of course," I replied. When, there was a pause on the other end of the line. "We're planning a trip related to transactions," he said. "I understand your sister's birthday is this Saturday." My mouth went dry. "Yes, it would be convenient if you were present. It would simplify the documentation process." I stared at the wall where my diploma hung and realized life sometimes closed circles with a chilling perfection. "Okay," I said finally. "I'll come." "Thank you," he replied. "We'll be in touch." The call ended. I lowered the phone. Sarah's birthday. A celebration that had transformed me into an outsider on paper. And it was there, amidst the festivities, that everything would finally come to light. Saturday morning found me waking up early. Not because I was anxious, exactly. More because my body seemed to have simply given up on the idea of resting in uncertainty. I spent a good while choosing what to wear, nothing too flashy, you understand. I didn't want to look like I was part of some celebration. But also not too casual, not at all. I wasn't coming as a guilty party. Finally, I settled on dark jeans, a light-colored shirt, and a blazer. The uniform of someone who's come to talk, not to celebrate. The house, my parents' house, greeted me with that familiar scent, cloyingly sweet, a blend of baking and expensive perfume. Cars were already parked in the driveway, and a low thrum of music drifted from inside. I lingered on the porch a little longer than I should have, just a few seconds. Then I pressed the buzzer. The door opened, and my mother stood there, frozen for a moment as she took me in. "You actually came," she said, her voice cool and sharp. "I'd begun to think you were far too busy dismantling the family." "I came because I was asked to," I replied, keeping my tone even. The living room was a riot of color balloons, fairy lights, and the constant murmur of laughter. Sarah, shimmering in a sequined dress, surrounded by her friends, looked utterly blissful and disconnected from reality. She glanced in my direction, frowned slightly, but said nothing. And then I saw him. Uncle Mark stood by the window, nursing a cup of coffee, tall, a touch gray at the temples, in a simple button-down shirt. My mother's younger brother, the only one in the family who'd always kept himself apart. Our eyes met. He furrowed his brow. Then his expression shifted to surprise, and he raised an eyebrow. Slowly, he began to walk toward me. "Emma," he said, his voice a little hesitant. "I didn't think you'd be coming." "Me neither," I admitted, the words tumbling out. He looked at me, really looked at me, not with judgment, but with a kind of intense curiosity. "Are you all right?" I nodded, offering a small, almost involuntary movement. He seemed unconvinced. The music had been turned up a little too loud, and the laughter felt almost performative. It was the sudden silence, 20 minutes later, that was truly jarring. A single, sharp ring at the door. Just one, clear and precise. My mother flinched. "I'll open it," my father said, moving towards the entrance. Within seconds, two figures crossed the threshold. A man in a plain suit and a woman clutching a file. Calm, collected. "Good evening," the man said, his voice measured. "Daniel Harper, police. We're here as part of an investigation into a possible case of fraudulent credit accounts." The music cut out abruptly. A nervous giggle rippled through the room, followed by a stunned silence. "This is a mistake," my mother said quickly, her voice strained. It's a holiday. We'll try to be brief, the detective replied. We just need to ask a few questions. His gaze fell on me. Miss Wilson, thank you for coming. The eyes of the guests darted between us, a silent assessment. What's going on? Sarah demanded, her voice sharp. What's happening? The detective opened his file. It concerns credit accounts opened in the name of Emma Wilson several days ago, using documents belonging to her but without her consent. A gasp went through the room. My mother's face drained of color. This is a family matter, she snapped. You have no right. We do, the detective responded, his voice steady, given the falsification of signatures and the identity theft. At that moment, Uncle Mark stepped forward. Wait, he said, his voice low. You're saying you opened credit accounts in the name of your daughter. My mother attempted a strained smile. Mark, not now. No, he said, shaking his head. Right now. He turned to me, his expression intense. Emma, is this true? I met his gaze. Yes. He let out a slow, deliberate breath. Then he turned to his sister. You don't even realize what you've done, he said. I was helping the family, my mother exploded. She was always obligated. Mark's voice rose for the first time, a sudden, sharp edge. She owes you nothing. She's your daughter, not your bank account. The silence that descended was thick, punctuated only by the frantic swallowing of someone's breath. You used her name, he continued, his voice controlled but firm. Her future. Do you even understand what this could lead to? My mother remained silent. Sarah stared fixedly at the floor. The detective closed his file. We've documented everything, he said. The next steps will be formally recorded. He nodded at me. We'll be in touch. When they left, the celebration was gone. The balloons hung lifelessly. The cake sat untouched. I stood by the doorway when Uncle Mark approached me. You're a brave one, he said softly, and I apologize that no one stepped in sooner. For the first time in a long time, tears welled in my eyes, stinging unexpectedly. I thought no one would believe me. I believe you, he stated firmly. And if you need support, legal, emotional, anything, you won't be alone. We stepped out onto the street. The evening was cool and unexpectedly calm. Behind me, the house, the one I'd spent my entire life trying to earn affection in, receded into the shadows. Ahead lay the unknown. But for the first time, it held a space just for me. The fallout didn't arrive in a sudden rush. There were no grand arrests, no handcuffs, no headlines. It was a slow burn, almost unremarkable, the way old habits tend to crumble. A week later, the bank officially closed our accounts. The debt was transferred to my mother's name, with a note attached about unauthorized use of personal data. They offered a deal, a voluntary admission, a commitment to full repayment, and financial oversight for the next few years. No court, but neither was there any way to pretend it hadn't happened. My father took a leave of absence for the first time in a very long while, not for a vacation, but to wrestle with paperwork, to navigate the banks, to answer a barrage of questions. I learned that from my Uncle Mark. He'd always been sheltering behind her, Mark said, his voice quiet. Now he's had to stand alone. My mother didn't call, didn't write. Her silence was different, not manipulative, but genuinely lost. Sarah deleted all the videos from the party. At school, people started asking questions. Not angry questions, just uncomfortable ones. For the first time, it wasn't my responsibility. We met my mother once, at my Uncle Mark's insistence. Not at home, in a small, unassuming cafe. She looked older, not in her appearance, but deep down. She spoke little, staring into her coffee cup. I never thought it would go this far, she finally said, her voice flat. I nodded. I know. It was true. She'd never considered the consequences, only the control. I truly believed you'd handle it, she added. You always have. I looked at her and suddenly understood. It wasn't an apology, it was a recognition, and that was enough. I'm not going to fix your problems anymore, I said calmly, but I hope you learn to solve them yourselves. She didn't reply, but she didn't argue either, something she hadn't done before. My credit history was restored. The bank sent a formal confirmation that I was released from any liability for the debt. I pinned the letter beside my diploma. A month later, I received a call from the same analytical company. We'd like to make you an offer, the recruiter said. We were impressed with how you conducted yourself during the interview. I smiled. The job was challenging, sometimes frightening but honest. I rented a small, bright apartment, one without any spare keys, no hidden expectations. I bought a decent sofa and a plant that required care, but not constant worry. My Uncle Mark would call just to check in. "How are you?" "Fine," I'd reply, and for the first time it wasn't a lie.